Nineveh. Nineveh was an ancient Assyrian city situated on the outskirts of Mosul in what is now Iraq. It was settled as early as 6000 BC during the late Neolithic period. By 3000 BC, Nineveh had become a major religious center dedicated to the Mesopotamian goddess Ishtar. The walled city was built along a fault line and experienced numerous earthquakes, including one that destroyed its temple to Ishtar. Despite these occasional setbacks, Nineveh became a major learning center and functioned as the capital of the Assyrian Empire for much of its existence. It grew to include parks, aqueducts, canals, an 80-room palace, and a library that housed 30,000 clay tablets. People lived there continuously for thousands of years. In the 50 years leading up to 612 BC, Nineveh was the world's largest city. That year, a coalition of allied forces sacked and razed Nineveh. The intruders massacred many of the city's residents and deported others to the countryside. Nineveh never recovered from the destruction, but it wasn't fully abandoned. In the centuries following the attack, the city fell under the rule of various civilizations, including the Seleucid Empire, the Parthian Empire, the Sasanian Empire, and finally the Arabs. By the 13th century, Nineveh was reduced mostly to ruins. Today, the site consists of 2 large mounds and the remains of the city's massive stone and mud brick wall that was built around 700 BC. Sadly, what's left of Nineveh is losing its battle to the elements, looters, and the Islamic State terrorist group, which threatened to eliminate or destroy any remaining evidence of its long and rich history. The Peebles Horde. In Scotland, a group of friends decided to investigate a random field near the small town of Peebles using metal detectors. Not long after they got started, Marius Stephen uncovered a strange bronze object buried under nearly 2 feet of dirt. But his metal detector kept on beeping, signaling that there was more treasure to be found just under his feet. The guys immediately knew they had found something awesome. They called the Treasure Trove Unit, a team of archaeologists that specialize in local discoveries. What started as a fun day of treasure hunting turned into an excavation that went on for almost a month. The treasure uncovered is now known as the Peebles Horde, and it includes some of the most valuable archaeological artifacts ever discovered in Scotland. These objects date back 3,000 years. The archaeologists found an ancient sword still sheathed in its scabbard, the wheel axle from a chariot, and a full horse harness that had probably been used by the horse that pulled the chariot. There was also an ornamental rattle pendant that adorned the harness, which is one of just 3 of its kind found in the United Kingdom, and the first ever in Scotland. The hoard was announced as a nationally significant find because very few Bronze Age hoards have been found in Scotland. The soil had just the right components in it to preserve wood and leather materials for thousands of years, even things like the leather straps for the horse harness. However, nobody is sure exactly who left all the treasures behind. Since it was so complex, the entire hoard had to be lifted as a block and taken apart one artifact at a time. As for how much the treasure is worth, we can only guess on that, but it's probably many millions of dollars. The dance floor of John the Baptist. Archaeologists claim that they have discovered the dance floor where John the Baptist was sentenced to death in the year 29 AD. St. John the Baptist was a Jewish prophet who foretold the coming of Jesus and had a circle of disciples. He preached about God's final judgment and baptized his followers, including Jesus himself. Like most saints, he was sentenced to death after he insulted King Herod Antipas, son of King Herod the Great, when he called him out for divorcing his wife and marrying his brother's wife instead. King Herod was worried about the growing influence of John the Baptist, getting people all riled up, and so according to historical records, King Herod Antipas had the man executed at an unnamed fort near the Dead Sea in what is today Jordan. However, the Bible tells a much more dramatic tale, saying that King Herod Antipas decided to kill John the Baptist because of a dance. He was about to marry his brother's wife Herodias, who had a daughter named Salome. During the king's birthday party, his future daughter performed a dance that was so beautiful and charming, he promised to give her anything she wanted. What she wanted was John the Baptist's head on a platter for insulting her mother. The king fulfilled the request, and the preacher was beheaded. Until recently, this was seen as just a story from the Bible. However, a courtyard recently uncovered at the archaeological site of Machaerus in Jordan may very well be where this fabled dance was performed. This is according to archaeologists working with a team to excavate important areas around the Dead Sea. Experts recognized one part of the courtyard as the throne of King Herod Antipas, and that was when they realized the dance floor had probably been right in front of it. The reconstruction of the site with the courtyard and the throne area next to it indicate that all the elements of the story are there. It is historically likely that the excavation has brought the dance floor of Salome to life, and this may have been where the saint was sentenced to death. Jade burial suit. The Han Dynasty in China was extremely powerful and rich. The royal and the wealthy for some reason chose a very unique burial suit that looks almost robotic, pieced together with mosaic tiles made from jade. These jade suits were extremely expensive, and for centuries people believed that these suits were just legend. Jade was the most precious stone in ancient China that symbolized purity and moral integrity. But in 1968, researchers announced the discovery of a tomb with an extremely well-preserved suit, proving the stories were real. Then they discovered another complete suit. One of them had 2,498 jade plates and over 2.5 pounds of gold wire. Subsequent discoveries of more jade suits led researchers to conclude that they were probably fairly common among the Han Dynasty's wealthiest aristocrats. Unfortunately, many, if not most, jade suits were likely lost to grave robbers at some point in history. Other suits that have been found were made up of small square or rectangular pieces, although archaeologists have found others made with triangular, trapezoid, or rhomboid pieces. The pieces were sewn together with wire, and some suits were held together with gold, silver, or silk thread. It looks like the type of string that was used depended on a person's social status. Emperor suits were threaded with gold, while suits belonging to princes, princesses, dukes, etc. contained silver thread. Copper thread was used for the sons and daughters of those whose suits were bound with silver, and lower-ranking aristocrat suits were held together with silk. All other members of society were forbidden from having a jade burial suit at all, and they probably couldn't afford it anyway. People did not always follow these rules, and it looks like some tried to make these burial suits out of other, less expensive materials. On average, it took several years to create just one suit. These are now recognized as some of the greatest treasures in China. The Tomb of the Emperor. The Great Terracotta Army is one of the most amazing archaeological discoveries ever made. But what a lot of people don't know is that it's only one of many amazing tombs, also packed full of incredible statues. The Terracotta Army was part of the tomb of the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. But there was a tomb recently discovered that belonged to a Han Dynasty emperor named Jing, who lived around 188 to 141 BC. According to historical records, Emperor Jing was a stubborn man and an arrogant ruler who once beat his cousin to death during a board game. Jing was heavily influenced by the rise of Confucianism. He had a fairly stable style of governing that the people enjoyed, and he even reduced taxes, did not partake in too many military expeditions, and stopped punishing people by mutilating them. All in all, he went down in history as a pretty good emperor, so maybe his brother deserved it. Upon his death, Jing was put inside a tomb that rivaled even that of the first emperor, whose tomb has never been opened. So far, about 8,000 figurines have been found as part of the Terracotta Army. However, Emperor Jing was buried with between 40,000 and 50,000 detailed statues that were meant to serve him in the afterlife. But he didn't only take warriors with him. Figurines have been found depicting courtiers, concubines, dancers, horses, pets, and even court eunuchs. It's not clear why the Chinese government hasn't been giving as much attention to this other tomb, even though it may be just or even more impressive as Emperor Qin. Iram of the Pillars. The Quran makes several mentions of an ancient city or a region called Iram of the Pillars. Roman and Nabatean traders reportedly recognized it for its vast wealth and its lofty buildings. Some believe that Iram was the home of a mighty tribe called the Ad. The Quran says they came right after the time of Noah and built monuments on elevated places. The city sometimes went by the name of Ubar and may have functioned as the capital of the kingdom of Ad. According to the Quran, a catastrophic wind blew through the region for 7 days straight and buried Iram in the sand, leaving no trace of it visible to the naked eye. What's left of it, if anything, is thought to be somewhere on the Arabian Peninsula. Nobody has ever found evidence of Iram being a real place, leading some experts to believe that Iram might have been a myth, a product of folklore that's been handed down through the generations. But even if this is the case, the stories may be rooted in a real place. Many people have searched for Iram, but it remains shrouded in mystery to this day. T. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, described the elusive ancient city as the Atlantis of the Sands. In other words, even if Iram actually existed, it continues to hide from everyone, but there are some desperately trying to find it. Shipwrecked Coins. A gang of treasure hunters in Florida found a very valuable cache of ancient coins from a sunken shipwreck. The ship was part of a fleet of Spanish vessels that sunk off the coast of Florida way back in the year 1715. The treasure hunters found 22 silver coins that have been estimated to be worth about $6,000. That's not too bad for a day of treasure hunting. Plus, the treasure hunters didn't even need to dive down to a shipwreck to find them. They uncovered the coins after they washed up on a beach following a brutal storm that moved over the Gulf of Mexico in February. The winds reached top speeds of up to 40 miles per hour, along with waves that were 13 feet tall. During the storm, the coins must have gotten swept off the bottom of the sea and deposited on the sandy shore. The friends were well aware of the potential treasure after a storm like that, as they have found things before following a night of wind and rain, such as ancient belt buckles, pieces of porcelain, and other random artifacts from the 1700s. This time, they found artifacts that actually made them a bit of money. The ship the coins came from sank during a hurricane. According to Smithsonian Magazine, the ship was part of a larger fleet carrying trade goods from Cuba back home to Spain. Only a single vessel escaped the storm fully intact. The rest were either heavily damaged or sank in the ocean. Fossils in a golden ball. Amateur archaeologist Aaron Smith discovered some very strange ancient sea creatures hiding inside of what kind of looks like the golden snitch from Harry Potter. The discovery happened on the beach in Yorkshire, when the young archaeologist uncovered a rock coated in iron pyrite, what you may know as fool's gold. The rock is so shiny and so smooth, and it looks so much like gold that at first glance it could be mistaken for a golden cannonball. Amazingly, when Smith broke the golden ball open, he was rewarded with a piece of history dated back over 185 million years. There was a cephalopod literally fossilized inside of the iron pyrite. This was a type of Clevacera fossil, with Clevaceras being an extinct type of cephalopod that lived during the Jurassic period. Because these cephalopods came with shells, they were able to be fossilized, unlike modern squids and octopuses that have no bones. Believe it or not, these kinds of discoveries are actually pretty common in the United Kingdom. Golden balls can be found mixed in with other rocks along the shore, and they almost all have fossils of extinct critters hiding inside of them. Wine rituals. An archaeological expedition has recently discovered leftover traces of wine in a zoomorphic vessel used in ritualistic ceremonies thousands of years ago. The wine vessels come from the archaeological site of Aradetis Orgora in the country of Georgia. The expedition was led by researchers from the Ca' Foscari University of Venice and the Georgian National Museum. The vessel dates back to the year 3000 BC. It's shaped like an animal, though it's not clear what kind. The vessel has 3 feet on its bottom and a hole in the back for pouring, but the head is missing. It was discovered on the charred remains of a floor where cultic activities once took place. What they found inside the vessel was preserved pollen from the common grapevine, suggesting that wine was used heavily in the rituals of the ancient Kura Araxes culture. The Kura Araxes people lived in modern-day Georgia, parts of Iran, and in the Palestinian region. They are the oldest prehistoric culture in the area, thriving up until the 3rd millennium BC. Where they went and why they vanished is still a bit of a mystery. Archaeologists believe the wine was either offered to the gods or consumed by whoever was participating in the ritual ceremony. It's also an interesting discovery because now we know grape wine has been cultivated in Georgia for at least 5,000 years, making it one of the oldest Georgian rituals. Even today, wine is drunk from vessels made of animal horns in rituals. Greenland Vikings. Eric the Red was a Viking who was exiled from Iceland in 982 for committing a murder. He led a fleet of 25 boats to Greenland, where the settlers established 2 communities. The first one, known as the Eastern Settlement, was situated near the island's southwestern coast. The other village, you guessed it, the Western Settlement, was located roughly 404 miles to the north along Greenland's western coast. There were initially around 500 settlers consisting mostly of wealthy farmers and chieftains who established farmsteads and built Christian churches. They fished, hunted wild caribou and seals, and kept livestock including cattle, sheep, and goats. The eastern settlement grew to include around 500 farms, while the western settlement had just 100. At its peak, the colony's population numbered around 5,000 people. When Norwegian missionary Hans Egede arrived in Greenland in 1721, he found the settlements in ruins and the residents had vanished. Researchers don't know what happened to these communities. They think it may have something to do with a mini ice age during the 13th century that was triggered by a massive volcanic eruption in Indonesia. Evidence shows that around that time, Norse Greenlanders switched to a diet that consisted mainly of marine animals. This indicates that their livestock may have died off during the sudden cold spell. Many experts argue that climate change alone cannot explain the Greenland Vikings' disappearance. Instead, they blame a combination of factors, including the possibility that some residents returned to Europe. But the plain and simple truth is that our understanding of the circumstances is unclear. Cosmic pearls. Researchers in Sarasota County came across something absolutely bizarre while looking through fossilized clams on the beach. Mike Meyer, a university student from South Florida, was doing fieldwork with a friend of his, looking for evidence of Florida's great geological history. They were collecting clams that had been fossilized for millions of years, and then cracking them open to see what was inside. That was when they found a collection of cosmic pearls. The pearls are very small, not even as big as a grain of salt. Each translucent ball looks like a bead of glass. However, after the students took the beads back to the lab for analysis, they discovered them to be microtectites, very small particles that form when an object from space impacts the atmosphere and explodes, sending molten gunk falling through the sky. By the time the molten gunk touches down, it has turned into beads of crystal. After making the discovery, Mike kept on looking anyway. He ended up collecting 83 of these cosmic pearls and keeping them in a small box for over 10 years. Further analysis proved that the spheres contained traces of exotic metals from outer space. How exactly they got into the clams is still a bit of a mystery, as is how much money the pearls could be worth. They have no monetary value at the moment, but in the future, having 83 pearls that literally came from space could prove to make Mike a very rich scientist. Ancient Temple of the Moon. A secret passageway has been discovered underneath a sacred pyramid in the ancient Aztec city of Teotihuacan. Archaeologists say it may have been used as an entranceway into the underworld. The passage was discovered beneath the Pyramid of the Moon by scanning under the surface of the Earth using new technologies. Researchers found a cavity going all the way from beneath the pyramid to the center of the nearby Plaza of the Moon. This amazing discovery has confirmed that the ancient people who lived in this once great city dug tunnels beneath their monuments. However, it's not exactly clear what they used the tunnels for. Archaeologists, of course, have a few theories. They believe the people may have used this underground labyrinth to emulate the underworld, a place where in their mythology they believed all organic life was created. On the other hand, the tunnels may have been secret passageways for important priests to move from monument to monument without being bothered by the public. Perhaps both, since underground was a sacred space, in between the living and the dead, and the priests had the ability to be with both. As for the Pyramid of the Moon itself, construction began in the year 100 BC as nothing but a small platform where ritual ceremonies were likely carried out. It took 550 years to complete. By the year 450, it was a pyramid around 150 feet tall and filled with mysterious tunnels, often used in human sacrifices and to carry out rituals to appease the gods. The Hermit King's Lair. Located near the River Trent in the countryside of central England, a site called Anchor Church Caves once served as a refuge for an exiled Anglo-Saxon king. Long regarded as an 18th century folly, in other words, a building made for purely decorative purposes, the structure probably served a real purpose. The cave house was built around 1,200 years ago and may have housed Northumbrian King Eardwulf, who was deposed and exiled for unknown reasons in 806 AD. The disgraced medieval monarch lived during a politically turbulent time that was marked by persistent fighting between kingdoms and kings. Eardwulf was removed from power, possibly by his own son, just 10 years after he murdered two of his predecessors and took the throne in 796 AD. He spent the rest of his life in exile in the neighboring rival kingdom of Mercia. As unusual as this sounds, living as a hermit in caves was one way for former royalty to take on a religious life of sorts, according to archaeologist Edmund Simons, who spoke with Live Science. A reconstruction of the cave's original plan consists of 3 rooms and a chapel. Simons said that cave dwellings like this may represent the only surviving examples of Saxon architecture. He participated in a study that identified 20 other cave houses in west-central England, dating as far back as the 5th century. During the 18th century, English aristocrat Sir Robert Burdett repurposed the Anchor Church caves as a dining space for him and his friends. They could eat outside in the privacy of the magical, secluded area. Who wouldn't want to eat here? Historians are excited that there is a building 1,200 years old in plain sight, and they are hoping to find more. The Vinka Civilization. The Neolithic Vinka Civilization, also called the Danube Valley Civilization, originated as early as 7000 BC. It grew to occupy a vast swath of southeastern Europe, including parts of modern-day Serbia, Kosovo, Bulgaria, Romania, and Macedonia. The Vinka culture is widely considered the cradle of European civilization. Its people built some of the largest prehistoric settlements in the region, fueled a population boom, and played a major role in advancing farming after it was introduced to the area. The Vinka developed a plow for sowing their crops and began using copper eating utensils at least 1,000 years before they became common in Europe. They were not culturally unified, but maintained solidarity by trading all kinds of ritual objects and goods over a vast network of settlements. Zoomorphic and anthropomorphic figures were defining aspects of the Vinka culture. The civilization used around 700 symbols, which some scholars classify as one of the earliest forms of writing. Evidence indicates that some Vinka settlements were occupied for at least 1,000 years before they were abandoned for unknown reasons. Inuit artwork in Detroit. Some very valuable Inuit treasure has been discovered in a rundown old house in Detroit, of all places. Nobody would ever expect to find a literal hoard of extremely valuable Inuit artwork inside of a dilapidated house that was left abandoned. The discovery came after a pair of professional house flippers purchased the property. They bought the decrepit old place, which had been sitting empty for years after the owner passed away. The family of the deceased sold the house, including all the contents inside. When the buyers went in to take a look around, they found 40 prints, 24 of which were originals and signed by famous Inuit artists. The pieces of artwork came from the Canadian territory of Nunavut, the coldest and remotest place in all of North America. Keep in mind that these paintings aren't that old, but their significance and monetary value is exceptional. The artwork is beautiful, created by artists living in the West Baffin Eskimo Cooperative on the southern tip of Baffin Island, basically at the end of the earth. Each piece of artwork sells for thousands of dollars, with one of the more popular pieces being sold recently at an auction for $216,000. Either the person who had owned the house previously didn't know what the paintings were or forgot about them. Nobody even knows how the old owner got their hands on Inuit artwork from a world away. But luckily for the house flippers, they're basically set for life. And now for number 6. But first, want to give a big shout out to Bon Gonzalez and Lil Mackie for supporting this channel. Thank you so much for watching and spending time with us. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the Origins Explained family. Arctic dinosaurs. A research team has discovered a dinosaur nursery in the Arctic. Scientists with the University of Alaska Fairbanks learned that about 70 million years ago, the Arctic was full of dinosaurs. They found evidence of all different branches of life living in the region throughout the entire year, from small bird-like predators to larger carnivores like tyrannosaurs. Pat Druckenmiller, who worked with the scientific team, said they now have unequivocal evidence that many dinosaurs were nesting far north in the Arctic Circle. You might be thinking to yourself that of course dinosaurs lived in the Arctic, but this wasn't actually a known fact until now. This was the first time that scientists could prove dinosaurs reproduced at higher latitudes. Previously, scientists believed dinosaurs migrated south for the winter to warmer weather, just like birds do today. But they didn't. Dinosaurs laid eggs in the Arctic and then hung around all year. The scientists uncovered fossilized evidence of what they described as a giant prehistoric maternity ward, with fragments of bones and teeth, many of them no larger than a needle. These bones were left over from hordes of prehistoric dino babies. Amazingly, the only way scientists could analyze these itty-bitty little bones was by scooping buckets of sediment from cliffs and then running the material through tiny screens to remove rocks and soil until all they had left were almost microscopic baby dinosaur bones. They don't know every last species that lived here in the Arctic, but there were definitely a lot. Medieval Nubian Cathedral. Using remote sensing technology, a team of Polish archaeologists working in Old Dongola, northern Sudan, recently discovered the largest Nubian church ever found in the region. This suspected medieval cathedral may have served as a seat of power for archbishops when Christianity gained a foothold in the Nubian kingdom of Makuria during the mid-6th century. Earlier this year, a team led by director Artur Obluski from the Polish Center of Mediterranean Archaeology found an empty space in the town's underground citadel. When they investigated further, they expected to find a town square that perhaps hosted communal prayers. Instead, the team encountered the structure which proved to be a vast medieval Nubian cathedral, far from the rest of Christendom, but probably one of the most powerful Christian communities in Africa. At the site, they unearthed 2 apse walls decorated with large figures, as well as a large domed tomb, which Obluski believes may be the burial of an archbishop. The building measures roughly 85 feet wide and is about as tall as a 3-story apartment building. After thriving as a Christian center into the 14th century, Dongola fell under the influence of Islam. Excavations have been ongoing since 1964 and currently aim to document the final period of Christian Dongola, as well as the development of pre-colonial African societies. Further research will hopefully help Obluski and his team accurately date the cathedral, which was likely built during the time period when churches were influential landowners that were typically run by elites and royals. Cannibal Aztecs. Bones discovered at the Great Temple of the Aztecs in Mexico have revealed some pretty disturbing secrets. Archaeologist Gabino Lopez Arenas investigated skulls, jaws, and other bones that were found as remnants of offerings inside the temple, as well as around the old historic center. These pieces of bones were found with cuts and exposure to fire, which has led archaeologists to conclude that between the years 900 and 1521, the rulers of the Aztec civilization, as well as the priests, and some of the most prominent warriors, practiced cannibalism as part of their religion. According to Lopez, the evidence found throughout the ancient capital of Tenochtitlan shows that humans were decapitated and often dismembered, and then, almost immediately after that, they were thrown into a fire. Their bones show evidence of prolonged cooking, then immediate cutting. This suggests that the humans were roasted raw over the flames, then their flesh was scraped off and consumed. But why did the most important Aztec leaders eat human beings? Archaeologists say it has to do with absorbing the strength which still remained in the victims' bodies. The Aztecs looked at their human victims as the incarnations of whichever gods they represented, which meant when they ate their flesh, they would share in their divinity. However, it's important to note that they didn't eat human meat as part of their everyday diets. This was strictly a ritual thing for the elite members of society. The Mississippians. Between 800 and 1600 AD, a Native American civilization called the Mississippians thrived throughout much of the United States. They built a trade network of loosely connected urban villages and satellite settlements, many of which contained large earthen platform mounds. The architecture varied by region, but the settlements were tied to a common culture and belief system centered around ritual game playing. As far as experts know, the Mississippians did not have any stone architecture or a writing system. The culture originated in the Mississippi River Valley. Its largest city and religious center, Cahokia, was located in what is now southern Illinois. The extensive Mississippian trade network stretched as far west as the Rocky Mountains, east to the Atlantic Ocean, north to the Great Lakes, and south to the Gulf of Mexico. Mississippians differed from other Native American societies in numerous ways. They intensively farmed maize and had a complex chiefdom and social structure, which led to a level of inequality that was seemingly absent from other Native American cultures. The civilization peaked between 1200 and 1400, at which point it began to decline. Warfare and political turmoil increased, prompting many of Cahokia's residents to leave. By 1500, most factions of the Mississippian culture had dispersed or were in severe distress. Very few settlements were still around when Native Americans and Europeans came into contact for the first time. Several modern indigenous groups are thought to descend from the Mississippians, including the Alabama, Appalachee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Osage, and Seminole, just to name a few. Maya gold orbs. Archaeologists in Mexico discovered some strange golden artifacts underneath the ancient pyramid in the archaeological site of Teotihuacan. This was the old Aztec capital located just a few miles outside of Mexico City. A mysterious tunnel was found stretching underneath the temple of the feathered serpent. In order to search the underground tunnel safely, archaeologists used a robotic probe equipped with infrared technology. They were hoping to find some amazing new artifacts that could shed more light on the ancient Aztec people. It was about 250 feet deep into the underground tunnels that the probe found something unusual. There were what appeared to be thousands of glints of light flashing in the darkness. Upon closer inspection, the archaeologists realized they were looking at a pile of golden orbs. Nobody knew what these things were. Later analysis showed the orbs were made of clay and wrapped in special gold foil. The gold balls are so weird that archaeologists barely have any theories as to what they were used for. However, they do believe the underground tunnels were probably utilized as a sort of ritual space, where priests traveled between the living and the dead, and human beings were sacrificed. This would suggest the precious golden orbs were used as a part of sacrificial rituals. But how exactly they were used, and just how valuable they were to the ancient Aztecs, is still a mystery. What do you think they could have been for? Let me know in the comments below. Iron Age plastics. Archaeologists have made a weird ancient discovery involving plastic. Most of us are pretty aware by now that plastic has perforated every last inch of the Earth. And now, it seems to be sweeping into archaeological sites as well. In the Iron Age village of Castle Henless, where a small community thrived in what is today Wales about 2,000 years ago, researchers have found thousands of pieces of plastic. Here's how it happened. The historical town was reconstructed by archaeologists and researchers using the exact same materials that the villagers used back during the Iron Age. It's one of the coolest archaeological sites anywhere in Wales, hidden in the rolling hills and lush greenery of the countryside. It's been open to the public for 35 years and is one of the top destinations for local school trips. Then in 2018 and 2019, some of the old houses needed to be replaced. This was when the plastic was found. Despite the archaeological site being incredibly well maintained and constantly cleaned, there was plastic everywhere. Researchers were shocked by the sheer amount. This site should have been immaculate. It's not like people were throwing plastic trash all over the ground. And still, researchers uncovered thousands of scraps of plastic, suggesting that everywhere else on the planet is way, way worse. Mediterranean whales. Around 2,000 years ago, during the 1st century, the famed Roman author, naturalist, and philosopher Pliny the Elder wrote about orcas hunting whale calves in the Mediterranean Sea near the Strait of Gibraltar. During the summer, the killer whales viciously slaughtered mother whales and calves in the Bay of Cádiz, according to Pliny's account. What's weird about this is there are no killer whales in the Mediterranean. No one has seen killer whales off the coast of Spain. In fact, not many whale species are seen in the Mediterranean, period, and none are known for breeding in the region, leading researchers to believe that Pliny may have mistaken dolphins for whales. But dolphins aren't known for slaughtering mother whales and calves either. Now, groundbreaking research carried out in recent years suggests that Pliny's account is factual. A 2018 study describes the discoveries of bones belonging to North Atlantic right whales and Atlantic gray whales, which were found among the ruins of an ancient Roman fish processing facility along the Strait of Gibraltar. Unearthed in the ancient Roman city of Baelo Claudia near modern-day Tarifa, Spain, the evidence fits perfectly with Pliny's claims, even if it does not remotely reflect the region's ecology today. Lots of things have changed in thousands of years, not just the rise and fall of empires. The discovery has prompted experts to wonder if the Romans harvested whales, in addition to their known tradition of harvesting tuna and other large fish. According to lead study author Ana Rodriguez, while ancient fishermen lacked the technology to venture out to sea and hunt large whales, it's possible that they may have taken advantage of the opportunity to kill them while they were close to shore. Anna further explained that the study shows how even heavily studied regions have surprising elements to their past, leaving one to wonder what else has been lost to history in places like the Mediterranean. The Lady of Cau. The Lady of Kao is considered by archaeologists and historians to be the most important and powerful woman anywhere in ancient Peru. Peruvian archaeologist Regulo Franco, who was involved in the discovery of the Lady of Kao's tomb, says that she was the first woman in the Moche civilization to have absolute power over the nation. She was the absolute ruler. The Lady of Kao was buried in an impressive tomb, which remained hidden and untouched for 1,700 years, until archaeologists recently came upon it. Her tomb was found at the Cao Viejo Temple, part of El Brujo archaeological complex on the northern coast of Peru. She was entombed with a fabulous collection of jewelry and grave goods, more even than most buried kings. She was also found entombed with 5 additional people, 2 priests, a pair of bodyguards, and a teenage girl. These people were meant to assist the Lady of Kao in the afterlife and were probably sacrificed for the opportunity. At the time of the discovery, the archaeologists had no idea they were dealing with a queen. She was encased in 25 layers of cloth under a barrier of copper plates. Now, researchers are saying that at 25 years old, the Lady of Kao was the most important ruler of the Moche people, even at her unimposing stature of 4'10". She's also proof that women played a much more prominent role in South American cultures than previously believed. The Oxum. The Oxumite Empire was an African kingdom that spanned modern-day Eritrea and northern Ethiopia, as well as parts of Djibouti, Somalia, and Somaliland. It rose to power around 80 AD and met its mysterious downfall in 825 AD. The Kingdom of Oxum was a major player along a commercial trade route between the Roman Empire and ancient India. It used its far-reaching power to influence politics and societies as far away as the Arabian Peninsula across the Red Sea. Oxum was also the first sub-Saharan empire to mint its own coins and adopt Christianity. During the early 7th century, the Oxumites stopped making new currency. Around the same time, residents were forced to flee inland, where they sought refuge on higher ground from some sort of upheaval. The capital was abandoned and resettled at an unknown location. The Oxumite Empire is one of the least documented civilizations. Historians know little about it, and the reasons for its collapse are a mystery. One theory suggests that the Oxumites became economically isolated as other civilizations came to dominate the Red Sea, and that this triggered their downfall. According to legend, a Jewish queen named Judith, or Judith, ordered the burning of Oxum's Christian churches around 960, but many historians question whether this story is true, or if Judith even existed to begin with. Another story claims that a pagan queen from a rival tribe was responsible for ending the Oxumites' power. Climate may have also been a factor. During the 1st century, it rained more than usual, increasing the region's food supply. But there was a huge population to support, and it's possible that the land could no longer handle the intense farming that was required to keep people fed. Beast engravings. Archaeologists are still baffled by the wild discoveries at Sutton Hoo, the biggest treasure hoard ever found on British soil. Specifically, the discovery of weird beasts etched into a mysterious artifact has caused some confusion. As you may already know, Sutton Hoo is a massive archaeological site that was first excavated back in 1939. It began with 2 medieval cemeteries and turned into a buried treasure unlike anything previously found. And even though the discovery was technically made around 80 years ago, there are new mysteries appearing all the time. For example, there was an artifact recently investigated that scientists couldn't identify. According to Dr. Brunning with the British Museum, there is a heavy gold buckle covered in bizarre features and depictions of monstrous beasts that nobody can figure out. The creatures are ambiguous, with limbs that are long and bodies contorted in unnatural positions. They look like goblins or maybe aliens, and historians don't understand why they were engraved on the buckle or what they could mean for the rest of the hoard. Could the warrior the buckle belonged to have been fighting strange medieval monsters back in 625 AD when the treasure was lost? Or it could be that whoever crafted the buckle had a horrifying imagination. Right now, archaeologists don't have the answers, and they can't even figure out what kind of monsters are depicted here. Black Death coins. A metal detectorist in England has uncovered 2 extremely rare and very valuable gold coins. Treasure hunters with metal detectors find coins all the time, but these 2 are exceptional and unique. This is mainly because they come from the days of the Black Death. The coins date back to the 14th century, when the plague began to sweep across Europe. Each coin has the image of Edward III on it, the English king who attempted to introduce gold coins to England back in the year 1344. The first attempt was a failure. The coins actually proved too valuable, and it was a big fiasco. The king tried again later and issued new coins from between 1344 and 1351. These coins worked out much better. This is the other reason why the coins are so valuable. They were minted during the first decade in English history where people could actually use gold coins for trade. It would be like having one of the first dollar bills ever printed. The only damage the coins have is that they are a bit folded. They look a little like tacos. However, each coin is 96% pure gold. This is literal treasure, nearly 700 years old. Back in the day, each coin was worth roughly $8,350 in today's currency. The two coins together in your pocket would have been the equivalent of carrying $16,700 in bills or poker chips. Today, the coins are likely worth significantly more. Nobody knows how much they may earn at an auction, but the guy who found them will probably have enough hard cash for a nice new sports car. What would you do with this kind of money? Let me know in the comments below. Prehistoric Seal. While exploring the ruins of a prehistoric settlement in Israel, archaeologists discovered an old clay seal dating back 7,000 years that predates the art of writing. This seal comes from before Israel ever entered the Bronze Age. The seal, which is a type of stamp, looks oddly like stamps that are still used today. There were actually 150 clay seals found at the archaeological site of Tel Saf, but this particular one stood out to the researchers, who called it a rare find of great historical value. But just what on earth could a clay seal have been used for 7,000 years ago, and before Israel even developed the written word? It's not like people were sending letters in the post. These types of seals were used to mark cargo, silos, and even barns. Believe it or not, these seals were often used as a kind of anti-theft system. For example, a farmer would stamp the seal over a closed barn door, and if that seal was broken when they returned, it meant someone had snuck into the barn. They would do the same thing for shipments. If a shipment arrived and the seal of a particular piece of cargo was broken, it would mean someone had opened that cargo and possibly stolen something. These types of seals are still used today for securing letters, documents, and yes, cargo. Prehistoric Beast. One of the first vertebrates to evolve on land lived around 310 million years ago in what is now the Mason Creek in Illinois. Dubbed Jormungandr bolti, the creature was a microsaur measuring just 1.9 inches long. It had a long, slender body with short limbs and a blunt skull. The species is named after Jormungandr, the world serpent of Viking mythology that was large enough to wrap its body around the earth, and which once battled Thor, the Norse god of thunder. It had specialized scales that scientists believe were meant for repelling dirt, indicating that the ancient reptile burrowed underground and slithered like a snake, according to a recent study. Jade bolti went extinct around 251 million years ago. The fossil is giving scientists the rare opportunity to learn more about early microsaurs, which they believe were the first amniotes, a type of backboned animal that developed embryos in fluid-filled eggs, according to the University of California Museum of Paleontology. If this is the case, then Jade bolti's snake-like body is evidence that animals diversified faster on land than experts originally thought. And now for number 5. But first, want to give a big shout out to Zach Picer and Earth. Earth is watching our videos. Thanks so much for supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos about archaeology and amazing discoveries. Number 5. Stolen Roman frescoes. Sometime during the 1970s, someone illegally cut out 3 fragments of a 1st century Roman wall fresco in Stabie, a village near Pompeii. The pieces contain images of a dancing woman carrying a tray, a woman's head, and a cherub playing a flute. Law enforcement recovered the relics last year as part of a bigger investigation into illicit artifact trafficking. Records show that the frescoes changed hands between American, Swiss, and English antiques dealers several times during the 1990s. 3 other stolen frescoes that were seized in the investigation were found by police in 2012 in the village of Civita Giuliana, which is located to the northwest of Pompeii. Officers found the works after discovering a hidden tunnel leading to an illegal archaeological dig. Thankfully, police stopped the thieves before they carried out their plans to smuggle the stolen frescoes abroad. The suspects' criminal trials are ongoing. Meanwhile, archaeologists have continued to excavate at Civita Juliana and have found an array of fascinating artifacts, including the remains of 3 harnessed and saddled horses, as well as the remains of 2 people who died side by side. The return of important archaeological artifacts to their rightful place is a big deal, because once they are taken and switch hands and it becomes all about the money, the entire story gets muddied and confused. Viking Age Mysteries. A strange Viking mystery has been revealed in Norway. Using georadar, an archaeologist working with the NTNU University Museum discovered 15 burial mounds and 32 carved ditches. The issue here is that the discoveries were all made buried under solid ice. The archaeologist waited for the ground to be frozen and covered in snow, then took a four-wheeler and a ground-penetrating radar device to see what he could find. Ground-penetrating radar sends electromagnetic signals into the subsurface, painting an image of what's hidden under the ice. It's kind of like an X-ray machine for the planet. Turns out there is a lot going on underground here. The radar proved that about 9 feet under this solid ice is an entire world of Viking mysteries. Nobody knows who is buried in these 15 tombs, or what treasures could be frozen solid down there. Archaeologists estimate the burials were from between 650 to 950 AD, during what's known as the Viking Age. One of the biggest burial mounds was clocked in at having an inner dimension of around 100 feet, meaning it would have towered over the landscape before being destroyed and covered in ice. The radar also showed a ship burial under the ice, meaning there is a full Viking longboat down there with human bones and grave goods in it. But because the ice is so thick, it's basically impossible to bring these artifacts to the surface, but it has kept it safe from grave robbers. Cucuteni Trypillians. The Neolithic Cucuteni Trypillian culture rose to prominence around 5500 BC. Its people settled across parts of what is now Eastern Europe, including modern-day Russia, Moldova, and Ukraine. Between 4000 BC and 3500 BC, the Cucuteni Trypillians built Neolithic Europe's largest settlements, with populations numbering between 20,000 and 46,000 people. The civilization burned its settlements down every 60 to 80 years and often built new structures at the same sites. For example, the Pădure site in Romania contains 13 layers of remains from settlements that were destroyed and buried by new buildings. Researchers have no clue why the Cucuteni Trypillians did this, but it limited the amount of artifacts they left behind. The civilization also left no signs of a written language. As a result, experts have very little to learn about them. The few artifacts that were found intact include clay totems, copper tools, and spiritual objects. Cucuteni Trypillian settlements were first discovered during the late 19th century. Recent findings reveal that the obscure culture played a bigger role in human advancement than it's given credit for. But because of their habit of destroying the evidence, we'll probably never know the true extent of their knowledge and capabilities. Can you imagine burning your house down every 60 years and having to rebuild it? Let me know in the comments below. 19th century sword. A woman in Plymouth, Massachusetts was digging in her backyard when she found an unexpected treasure. She was digging with her shovel when she heard the click of metal on metal. Carrie Hadaway then dug up a fencing sword from the 19th century. Blown away by the random discovery, she took the artifact to a local researcher, who then told her the sword was probably crafted by a local blacksmith over 150 years ago. It's not clear how much she can get for the ancient sword at auction, but it's likely worth a pretty penny. Even more amazing is that after the discovery, Carrie went a little overboard on her home excavations. She began digging all through her yard and was flabbergasted by what she found. She turned up arrowheads, fossils of random animals she couldn't identify, and what she believes to be stone tools. It turns out Carrie's house is a treasure trove of ancient artifacts, most of which she's hoping to put on display at a local museum. Mysterious Spanish tombs. In Spain, archaeologists have unearthed a collection of mysterious tombs in an even more mysterious Islamic necropolis. Over 4,500 bodies have been uncovered, pulled from at least 400 tombs in a new archaeological site that spans 5 acres. The burial ground dates back to the 8th century and was found near the modern town of Zaragoza. The history of the area is bloody and brutal. Around the year 711, Arab forces had already begun to conquer the area. They remained in Spain until 1492, when the Catholic kings Ferdinand and Isabella recaptured Spain and forced the Muslims out. This cemetery was used to bury bodies of the Islamic forces who occupied the area for all of those centuries. There has been a fair bit of historical debate surrounding the Islamic occupation of the region, but this new discovery washes away any doubt that the people didn't live here in large numbers. Each body buried in the necropolis was done so according to the Islamic customs. This mostly means the body was always facing southeast toward Mecca. Archaeologist Eva Jimenez, who has been working closely with the project, told CNN that the discovery proves the Islamic presence in Spain was more serious than previously thought. There was obviously a large Muslim population here for centuries. Viking Era Tombs. Lasting from around 800 AD to 1050, the Viking era was kind of short, yet it made a long and enduring mark on European history. Discoveries from this fascinating period are continuously being made, with one of the latest consisting of 7 Viking-era tombs in the ancient Swedish town of Sigtuna, near modern-day Stockholm. Dating back to the 900s, the burials were built around the time Sigtuna was founded. They contain the remains of 4 adults and 4 children, and 2 of the children are believed to be twins. Based on their small size, the pair appeared to have died during or shortly after birth, according to project manager Johan Runer, who spoke with Live Science following the discovery. Archaeologists also found a handful of artifacts, including a leather belt with iron fittings. Silver coins were found in one Viking's mouth, which was once a common practice throughout the region. He further explained that the tombs are some of the oldest Christian burials ever found in Sigtuna. At the time, it was common to cremate the dead, but the bodies were buried in the ground. The site also contains charcoal pits and caskets bearing evidence of fire damage, which is a first for the area, although these archaeological features are customary for the Viking Christian period. It was kind of a mix between Christian and Viking practices. Some of the tombs had stone structures that are also typical of Viking Age Christian burials. The oldest shoe. A leather shoe was recently found in a German bog. That's not the most interesting headline, but it gets better when you learn that the shoe was lost in that bog for 2,000 years and uncovered recently by archaeologists, who say the shoe probably slipped off someone's foot, got trapped in the sticky mud, and then was perfectly preserved. The shoe was a type of sandal, simple, made from animal leather and closed with a leather strap. The shoe was found beside the remains of an ancient wooden road, a collection of wooden boards that had been laid across the marsh to allow people safe passage. Archaeologists even found a broken carriage axle. The obvious consensus here is that there was some kind of accident on the road, the wooden cart's axle broke, and someone lost their shoe trying to fix it. Thanks to the acidic conditions of the bog, the shoe remained just as it had been at the time of its departure from its owner's foot. It's now the oldest shoe ever discovered in the region, and a great piece of evidence of how people dressed at the time. Kerma. The Kerma culture was one of Africa's earliest civilizations. It established its self-named capital city at least 5,500 years ago in what is now Sudan. Kerma is one of the largest archaeological sites in ancient Nubia, a sub-Saharan region that was known for its gold deposits, incense, ivory, and other luxury products. By 1700 BC, the city was home to at least 10,000 residents. At its peak, it was the most powerful urban center in the region. The city had a royal audience hall, a palace, a mud brick temple, funerary temples, and chapels. Pottery and other items left behind by the Kerma are culturally distinct from the artifacts of neighboring kingdoms, including ancient Egypt. What's more, Kerman artifacts have been found over 200 miles from Kerma, reflecting the society's far-reaching ties with other groups. But the 30,000 graves at Kerma's cemetery show that the civilization was not completely free of influence from outsiders. The Kermans surrounded large graves with smaller burials, showing that they had a social hierarchy that may have been inspired by Egypt's societal structure. Some of their royal burials contain images of the god Horus and other Egyptian deities, as well as Egyptian pottery, amulets, and scarab seals. Egypt and Kerma clearly traded both material goods and cultural ideas, but their relationship soured at some point, and the Egyptians sacked the city around 1500 BC. Kerma went on to serve as the headquarters for several of the new kingdom's rulers. Constantine's finger. The finger of Constantine the Great was discovered sitting inside of storage at the Louvre Museum in Paris. This was not Constantine's real physical finger. Instead, it belonged to a huge statue of Constantine housed inside the Capitoline Museum in Rome, originally built in 1584 and placed on top of a column in Old Rome. This statue consists of a giant head and one of the emperor's hands, of course, minus a finger. This statue had been missing its finger for over 500 years. But how did the hand and the finger get separated? And why did it take so long for researchers to realize what had happened? Back in 1913, years after the ancient artifact was gifted to the museum by an Italian banker in 1863, a man who until his death had possessed one of the biggest collections in the world of Roman antiques, the finger was accidentally categorized as a toe. Nobody knew whose toe it was, and so the giant thing was just kind of stuck away and forgotten about. It wasn't until 2018 that researcher Aurelia Azima realized the connection. After a bit of back and forth between the museums, the finger was finally shipped to Rome and reattached to the 39-foot statue using a non-invasive method. It turned out to be one of the most valuable fingers in archaeological history. The Megalodon. At a construction site in Somerville, South Carolina, fossil hunter Matthew Bassick discovered the tooth of a prehistoric shark monster. Amazingly, the tooth wasn't even that hard to find. Matthew discovered the ancient tooth sticking out the side of a drainage ditch. He had been visiting the site specifically to look for fossils, and he hit the jackpot. Underneath the first tooth, he found a second. And according to Matthew, it was the second largest tooth he had ever seen. And this guy's a professional fossil hunter. See? One man's construction site is another's gold mine. But just what kind of animal did the teeth belong to? It was, of course, a megalodon, the biggest and most dangerous shark that ever lived. To give you a rough idea of how huge this megalithic monster was, its tooth weighed about 3 pounds and measured almost 6.5 inches. The tooth would overlap an ordinary person's hand. And it's not like the megalodon only had one tooth either. Its mouth was full of them, which is not surprising seeing as the giant shark could reach incredible lengths of over 60 feet. The megalodon was the biggest fish to ever live, gobbling up an estimated 2,500 pounds of food every day before it went extinct around 3.6 million years ago. All that eating took a whole lot of sharp teeth. As for Matthew, he added the new megalodon teeth to his fossil collection, which contains at least 250 other teeth from these great sharks. He said, "The shark gods were with me." Ancient Egyptian warship. At its peak around 2,400 years ago, the ancient city of Heraklion was Egypt's largest Mediterranean port. Its ruins are now submerged in Abu Qir Bay off the coast of Alexandria, where archaeologists recently discovered a wrecked warship from Heraklion's final years of existence. Found beneath a crumbled temple and 16 feet of clay, the ship's shape suggests that it was built for speed. Measuring 82 feet long, the vessel's hull is 6 times its width, indicating that it could travel quickly and was not meant for holding cargo or passengers. Based on its flat bottom and keel, which are useful for traveling in shallow water, researchers believe the ship was built for the Nile River. Heraklion, also called Tonis, was a melting pot of Egyptian and Greek culture. This is evident in the Abu Qir Bay ship, which contains a blend of Greek shipbuilding techniques and Egyptian design and construction. Experts believe that the vessel was built somewhere in Egypt using repurposed wood from older ships. During the 2nd century BC, a series of catastrophic earthquakes and tsunamis began to destroy Heraklion. The clay ground liquefied, collapsing buildings around the city, and causing large stone blocks from the Temple of Amun to crush the ship. The vessel is remarkably well preserved thanks to the clay that buried it. It's only the second warship from Egypt's Ptolemaic period that has ever been found. Dog burials. In Catalonia, Spain, archaeologists have come across evidence of ritual dog burials. These burials date back around 4,200 years before today, belonging to what is known as the pit grave culture. They were a group of Neolithic people in southern Europe, and the new discovery of the dog burial shows how they had a very close relationship with their animals. Dogs have been man's best friend for quite some time, and this is just more proof. Also interesting is that the dogs were often buried next to their owners, obviously thought of as part of the family. Genetic analysis even shows that they were fed similar diets to what humans were eating then, suggesting the people shared their meals with their dogs. So far, 26 dogs have been found in funerary structures from across 4 sites in Spain. Most of the pets only grew to be around 6 years old. However, a lot of the dogs died before they were 1 year old, suggesting they had been the victims of ritual sacrifice. But for what? Archaeologists don't know. They say the rituals only lasted for a span of about 100 years during the Iron Age. Afterwards, dogs continued to be buried with their owners, but they weren't killed on purpose. Etruscans. Italy's Tuscany region was once known as Etruria, and it was home to one of the most advanced ancient societies to develop outside of ancient Greece. The earliest known evidence of the Etruscan civilization dates back to around 900 BC, and the oldest examples of their writing originated around 700 BC. But their texts did not survive into modern times, leading scholars to rely solely on Greek and Roman sources. As a result, even the best experts can only partially understand the Etruscan language. There are numerous problems that come with trying to learn about the Etruscans based on what people from other cultures wrote about them. For example, archaeological evidence suggests that the Etruscans were indigenous to Etruria, but the Greeks wrote that the Etruscans descended from the indigenous Pelasgian population of Greece. The Greeks may have seen the Etruscans and the Pelasgians trading with each other, and the two societies may have had some similar traditions and customs, but any shared aspects of their lifestyles likely resulted from cultural exchange rather than migration, according to expert Dominique Briquel. The Etruscans began assimilating into Roman society during the 4th century BC, after losing a series of conflicts known as the Roman-Etruscan Wars. They were granted Roman citizenship around 90 BC, and in the following decades their territory was incorporated into the Roman Empire. Much of the Etruscan culture was likely lost throughout this transition, and even DNA studies have failed to determine exactly where the civilization came from. Pub coins. After 10 long years of hunting for treasure in his spare time, endlessly plodding along with his metal detector just hoping to find something valuable, Luke Mahoney finally hit the jackpot. He found the biggest hoard of his life in a field outside his local pub. The treasure collection boasted more than 1,000 silver coins, an impressive find thought to be worth over $100,000. Luke runs his very own metal detector shop near the very same pub by which he made the discovery. After 10 years of hunting randomly, he decided to check what was essentially his own backyard, and that paid off big time. The coins he found date back to between the 15th and 16th centuries. Based on what the experts told him, the coins were likely buried by a local landowner who went to fight in the Civil War and never came back. His riches remained in the ground for around 400 years. Now, Luke will likely split the profits with the pub owner, seeing as the coins were found on his land. Either way they split it, both guys are about to be rich. Sanqingdui discoveries. Archaeologists in China have been unearthing hundreds of bizarre and mysterious artifacts from what may just be the most important site in China. The archaeological site is the ancient city of Sanqingdui, dating back over 3,000 years. The National Cultural Heritage Administration says archaeologists have found over 500 priceless relics in recent months, including fragments from a creepy bronze mask and plenty of weird figurines crafted from ivory and jade. The site is so big that excavations have been going on for the last 3 decades. There is even a museum nearby where all the best artifacts are put on display. Despite so many excavations and so much archaeological attention, there still isn't much known about the mysterious Sanqingdui civilization. We know it was the largest centralized city anywhere in the region of what is today the Sichuan province. It dates back to around 2000 BC, and researchers have also discovered evidence that the city was once protected by huge walls. Some researchers claim the civilization had direct ties to the origin of Chinese culture. Others even say the people here may have been visited by extraterrestrials based on curious figurines crafted in the likeness of inhuman, alien-looking creatures. Of course, none of these theories have been proven. The most recent discovery came in the form of 6 giant sacrificial pits that had probably been used in an unknown religious ceremony. Humans were sacrificed, possibly to a strange deity, and their remains were tossed into holes in the ground. Coin Horde. Located on the Taman Peninsula in modern-day Russia, the ancient Greek city of Phanagoria had numerous enemies due to its strategic trading position within the Bosporan kingdom. Phanagoria was extremely wealthy, owing to its advantageous location. For centuries, the city faced repeated attacks by the Huns, Turks, and other groups hoping to seize its wealth. When Phanagoria was raided during the first half of the 6th century, a quick-thinking resident placed their coins in an amphora and frantically buried the loot, which they never came back to get. Archaeologists found the container filled with 80 copper coins called staters, while excavating a layer of Phanagoria that bears evidence of fire damage from the attacks. Large parts of the city were torched, destroying homes, wineries, and public buildings. Experts believe that the nomadic Huns, or the Avars, a group who fled from the Turks, may have been behind the brutal invasion. The coins bear images of late 3rd and early 4th century Bosporan kings. While their minting was discontinued around 341 AD, the coins continued to circulate in the region, coinciding with the use of Byzantine gold as currency. Stone Age raves. Looks like raging parties are nothing new. Apparently, they had raves back in the Stone Age. A new study has revealed proof that our ancient ancestors were dancing around like teenagers with glow sticks and EDM music. However, they were doing it a little differently. According to auditory archaeologist Rita Rainio, Stone Age people used ornaments made of elk teeth to create their music. These ornaments, almost like teeth wind chimes, were attached to their clothing. When they danced, the ornaments would make a great rattling noise. This apparently made it easier for them to immerse themselves in a musical soundscape, riding their bodies to the rattling of the teeth. It was a Stone Age dance party. Rita actually tried it out for herself, dancing non-stop for 6 hours while wearing the elk tooth ornaments, reconstructed based on artifacts recovered from prehistoric graves in Russia. At a burial site, 177 graves of men, women, and children were found, with at least half containing elk tooth ornaments. The consensus is that the Stone Age people of Russia were fascinated with music and dance at least 5,000 years ago, but maybe even further back. The giraffe culture. During the 3rd millennium BC, in what is now Iran's Halil River Valley, an early Bronze Age civilization called the giraffe culture emerged. The obscure culture's sprawling urban settlement was surrounded by rugged mountains on 3 sides and consisted of 2 large burial mounds, a fortified citadel, and numerous smaller buildings. The giraffe people had a sophisticated lifestyle and a complex social hierarchy for their time. They practiced religion and crafted fine goods like vases and statues. After peaking sometime between 2500 and 2200 BC, the civilization abandoned its settlements for unknown reasons. Their deserted villages were buried and forgotten. The sites were rediscovered during the early 20th century. They were excavated several times, but also fell victim to looters, leaving few artifacts for experts to learn from. Consequently, modern scholars know very little about the giraffe culture. It's clear that the people were a distinct group with their own architecture, language, beliefs, and a writing system that consisted of geometric figures. Some researchers believe that the society may very well be one of the cradles of civilization, one of the first places in the world where complex urban centers grew. It's even possible that the giraffe culture was once as great as the Sumerians or ancient Mesopotamia. Unfortunately, most of what they left behind has been lost to history. The Golden Hands. The ancient Chimu culture prospered on the northern coast of Peru between 900 and 1460 AD. They ruled about 620 miles of Peruvian coastline and were eventually beaten and wiped out by the more powerful Inca civilization, only 60 years before the Spanish landed and wiped out the Inca. Too bad they hadn't worked together. In any case, the Chimu people left behind some very amazing archaeological wonders. Their capital city of Chan Chan is a hotspot for valuable archaeological relics. The city was likely once the greatest in all of South America. The Chimu excelled at engineering, even creating a hydraulic canal irrigation system, learning how to fashion complex things out of metal, and making some of the most impressive golden treasures. One of these treasures is a pair of golden hands uncovered during an excavation. Researchers don't know what exactly these hands were used for. Some speculate they may have been props in an elaborate ritual, where a shaman would use the hands to touch sacred objects, or perhaps they were meant to represent the hands of the gods themselves. The hands appear to have been made out of pure gold, making their historical and monetary value immeasurable. The hands are currently housed in Peru's Gold Museum, safely out of reach of greedy thieves, hopefully. An ancient massacre. Speaking of sacrificial pits, a murder hole was recently discovered in eastern Croatia. The hole dates back 6,200 years. Within the hole, archaeologists found a group of 41 men, women, and children who had been brutally attacked and then dumped into a mass grave. At first, experts believed the victims were from World War II, perhaps casualties of the war or a village that had been wiped out during the 1990s Balkan conflict. It wasn't until researchers realized there were no bullets or even bullet holes that they knew the bodies were ancient. It helped that they also found fragments of old pottery to date the corpses. The next guess was that the victims had been part of a single community that had been targeted for total annihilation for unknown reasons. However, after doing a complete DNA analysis of the victims, what happened to be the largest genetic study of a mass killing in history, researchers learned the victims weren't even related. Even after the investigation, researchers never answered the question of who these people were, why they were killed, or who exactly did the killing. The lead author of the study, archaeologist Mario Novak, called it a mystery that will probably never be solved. Roman Road. The recent discovery of a Roman road submerged in the Venice Lagoon indicates that the area may have been filled with settlements before the city was officially founded during the 5th century. Based on past discoveries of artifacts in the area, archaeologists have long known that parts of the now submerged Venice Lagoon were accessible by land during Roman times, but they were unsure of the extent that humans occupied the lagoon. A recent archaeological mapping project of the lagoon revealed the presence of 12 structures in the Treporti Channel. Measuring up to 8.9 feet tall and 173 feet long, they appeared to have lined a road. The findings build on the previous discovery of what appeared to be paving stones by scuba divers during the 1980s. Additionally, the team discovered 4 more structures that were up to 13 feet tall and 442 feet long, the largest of which they believe was a dock or other harbor structure. It looks like a whole permanent settlement may have existed in the now submerged Treporti Channel. They theorize that the road may have been connected with a larger road network in the Veneto region, and that sailors and travelers used it to travel between the northern Venice Lagoon and the modern-day city of Chiaja. Medieval plague victims. Evidence has been found that in the initial days of the Great Plague, which wiped out roughly 60% of the European population in the 14th century, the victims of the pandemic were given very tidy burials. One of the problems with identifying plague victims today is that the disease ravaged the body so quickly that it never left any markers on the skeletons. But now, by studying DNA taken from the teeth of dead people, archaeologists working on the Plague Project were able to identify any person killed by the plague. Near Cambridge in the United Kingdom, archaeologists identified perfectly normal individuals buried at a parish cemetery. This is in stark contrast to the mass graves that came later on. What this suggests is that the more important a person was, the more likely they were to get a proper burial and not just be tossed into a pit. It also shows that there was more care taken near the beginning of the plague, whereas later, after half the population had been wiped out, all discretion was thrown to the wind and people were dumped or buried haphazardly. Thanks for watching! Would you have gone to a Stone Age rave? Do you want to be buried with your dog? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!